Welcome to Pokemon Secret Base. I'm your host, Kallie. This is IGN's show all about the world of Pokemon. Today, we're talking about the Pokemon World Championships from last weekend and the winners using some pretty crazy strategies and how to get into the competitive scene yourself. Today, I'm joined by Alanah Pierce. Hi. And Brendan Graber.
I'm going to catch them all.
Two new guests to the show. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi.
All right,
Thanks for having me.
Alanah, you joined me at the Pokemon World Championships.
It was awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool. And the battling there was really unique compared to last year because they introduced some new rules for the 2016 season.
Yeah, they also had Pokemon Tournament.
And Pokemon Tournament.
Yeah, so that's was really cool to see, just like in a side room.
Yeah, it was much smaller, but the people were just as excited. The competitors were so excited in that room. It was really cool. But yeah, so the pro players who won, so there's three divisions, if you don't know, for the Pokemon Championship Series. There's juniors, seniors, and that's like a 3-year, like sort of teens. And then Masters, I think, is usually like 16 above. It's done by years. But so we're going to be talking about the Masters division. Mm-hmm. Basically, the TCG was especially crazy, so I think I want to start there. Basically, the winner, the champion for TCG, Shintaro Ito from Japan, won using a card pretty much everybody thought was totally useless.
I love when that happens.
Yep. Yeah. It's Mega Audino. We have a recap on IGN.com. Joshua Yell is our TCG expert. Basically, that he called it binder trash, which is the term I love.
It's like the one that if you get it in your pack of cards, you're like disappointed.
Yeah,
like,
it's like,
oh.
Exactly.
This is my rare? Oh, man.
Yeah, if it's your rare, you're like, oh, great.
Yep.
Now I gotta try that again.
Yep.
But
it's used as like a bookmark. That's like, it's all for.
Exactly. You can't even trade it. Like, no one would even want it. Mm-hmm. But basically, it was good for two main things that are really popular. Shaman EX, which has the same amount of HP as Mega Audino's move, which is Magical Symphony, which I keep wanting to call it something else. But Magical Symphony, I think it's 110 damage on Shaman EX is a one-hit KO, and that gets you 2 prize cards.
That's pretty crazy.
It's an EX.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is Night March decks were super popular. When I was at Worlds on Friday when it was starting, I was talking to players who were in the TCG, and I was like, oh, what are you using? This kid's like, I'm using Night March. And I was like, yeah, you are. Like, Night March, if you aren't familiar with Night March, it's every Pokemon in your discard pile that has the move Night March adds another 20 damage if you use Night March with your Pokemon that's active.
That's crazy.
So you just put a bunch of Night March Pokemon, and they're usually like first evolutions, so they're pretty
They're all
weak.
like baby tier, like tiny hitters by themselves.
Yeah, but it's super strong. The thing that Mega Audino can do with Magical Symphony is put 50 damage on a benched Pokemon. So it could just knock out like a Pumpkaboo really easily, not even out in the field. And so Shintaro Ito basically figured out how to use this card that no one would expect, which means no one had a counter for it.
Right.
And that was really, really fascinating because no one would have thought, like, we were all predicting, like, oh, maybe it's, Night March, or maybe it's the Vespiquen deck that's going to win. Nope. Mega Audino.
Yeah, so that's like one of the big trends that I found talking to players while I was there, is they talk about their training being about them predicting what everyone else is going to have and then reacting to it. So they, like, actually make fake decks of what they think other players will have so that they can learn how to counter them properly. So the best way to beat everyone is to put in something that they wouldn't know how to counter, basically, which is exactly what happened to you.
Yeah, and not everybody, I mean, there were other people who used Mega Audino, but not as effectively as Shintaro. Like, I think it's the combination of when you get a good pull, like a good draw, you have good luck, knowing how to take advantage of that luck is really big in the TCG. That's what wins you matches. That's what wins you $25,000, which is the prize for the TCG.
It's a lot of money.
And this year they finally introduced cash. It used to be scholarships. Now you could choose if you were over 18. So we like $25 cold hard cash.
Yeah.
Just give me the money.
For that Pokemon. Do you remember when you were like a kid collecting Pokemon cards and I had a book that told me the projected values of Pokemon cards, and I was like, I'm gonna make so much money.
I had that with Magic the Gathering. I was like, this one day my giant box will be worth millions.
Yeah, and I still have that binder, and I haven't sold a single one.
Well, me
because
too.
I don't want to. I don't want to sell them, right? But if I had known, maybe I would have gotten better at the TCG, so I could win $25,000.
True, that's probably an easy way to do it. You don't need to sell them. You could just make a ton of money playing competitively.
Yeah.
Well, if you have any Mega Audinos, now is the time to sell them for some nice money because it's
True, actually.
pretty popular.
You probably won't be able to land a win with one again.
Yeah.
I would anticipate because people are going to be
Don't tell
ready.
them that
But-
when you sell it.
Yeah, like I wonder if the cards that people use to win the competitive matches actually influence like resale prices.
Oh, definitely.
Really interesting. Kind of cool the way that card games evolve like that. Like the same things happen with Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, it's like there's always like for like a season or two, there's one or two metas everyone kind of flocks towards, and then people try and go around like what's the perfect counter that what everyone else is using, and then they'll find that counter, and it's like a one-hit wonder, and then next season everyone's wary of that previous counter, so you can't do it again.
Yeah. It's fascinating watching them evolve.
Yeah.
It is. And the VGC metagame is like that too. So with the VGC championship this year, Wolf Glick, who was 2-time U.S. national champion, he's a repeat player. He didn't make it too far in Worlds last year. I mean, he was there at Worlds 2015 in Boston. But this was his year because basically with the 2016 competitive season, the Pokemon Company was like, you guys can use legendaries again. And everyone was like, oh no.
Yeah, so Mewtwo was back being legal again, and Rayquaza, which is crazy.
Yeah, not all of the legendaries. There's a distinction between legendary and mythical. So like Mew is mythical, but Mewtwo is legendary.
Yeah,
and
same as Xerneas. Like a lot of people still had Xerneas.
Xerneas is legendary, but like Jirachi is mythical. I have it like memorized. I'm not exactly sure what the distinction is, but so what happened was people were using Kyogre, Primal Kyogre, Primal Groudon, and Rayquaza, Mega Rayquaza, or like the big ones I saw. I also saw a lot of Groudon Xerneas teams.
Yeah, I saw a few Smeargles as well.
Yeah. Well, as far as legendaries goes,
Right.
a lot of people use Smeargle.
Yeah.
But what Wolf did is, so basically with the legendaries, Primal Kyogre and Primal Groudon have these weather moves that you need to counter with another abilities that you have to counter with another one of their abilities. Like Rayquaza, Primal Groudon, and Primal Kyogre are like the best counters for each other because you can't use like Sunny Day to counter Kyogre's. I forget. I'm totally blanking on what the ability's called, but the rain. I know that Groudon's is Desolate Land because I know more about Groudon than Kyogre. But so you can't use Rain Dance to counter Desolate Land.
Yeah.
You have to counter it with like Airlock or something, an ability like that. So there was a lot of switching going on this year.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people were just switching out rapidly and trying to kind of checkmate each other. So what Wolf did is his whole team was built around just switching and messing with his opponent, and appointing Pokemon to certain roles.
Did he call his team the Switcheroo?
I wish he had, but basically,
cool.
so in addition to having, so he was basically controlling the field. So in addition to having Rayquaza and Kyogre, he had a Raichu with Volt Switch, and if you don't know, Volt Switch attacks and then switches you out. And his Hitmontop had the eject button, which it switches you out as soon as you're hit. So his whole team was built to just totally
Constantly
screw with what you think is going to happen next. And he's really good at predicting his opponent. And basically, he won because he outmaneuvered and outpredicted all of his opponents. And so it was like switching to the nth degree.
Yeah.
And it was just, it's hard to say, like, that's not as shocking sounding as this card that nobody knew totally crushed everyone. This is more subtle.
This is tactics.
It was,
and some pretty extreme mind game.
It was so calculated
Yeah.
and crazy to watch, and people were like cheering his name.
Yeah,
It was
so
like,
the first match actually timed out because there was so much switching that it was just like, you know, he plays really defensively and he always has, but this time it was like entirely just based on switching, and I think he basically ended up getting through that just by managing to defend every single Pokemon.
Yeah.
And doing a small amount of damage to his opponent, but it just meant that he destroyed without really attacking very much. It was like the opposite of how I used to play Pokemon.
right, like he, instead of, you know, when you're like a kid and you take your starter and you just crash through the whole game. He didn't attack too much. His opponent, Jonathan Evans, had Mega Gengar, which has Shadow Tag, which doesn't allow you to switch out. So his opponent like came prepared to counter switching. But he would target that Gengar, and that's where he targeted his damage. And then as soon as Gengar was done, it was like, now protect Kyogre, because no other team that had Kyogre and Rayquaza was really good at the longevity of the Kyogre. He's like the only one who really was able to keep Kyogre alive and doing things. And I think that's where he had the advantage over everybody else. That's what made him the champion.
Having that Pokemon alive at the end, like if you're playing down the clock and switching out, like having your Pokemon alive at the end of it is probably what wins it for you.
Yeah. And also just disrupting Jonathan. Like Raichu has Lightning Rod, or his Raichu has Lightning Rod. So Jonathan's Kyogre used Thunder, didn't realize Raichu was going to be out on the field because it was Hitmontop. And I think it was Hitmontop, and Wolfie calls him back and sends out Raichu, and Jonathan, the look on his face, he just went, yeah. Like he was like, of course that would have happened. Like he tried to get the Thunder out on Rayquaza and didn't do it.
Yeah, I also feel like part of this is a credit to Wolf in that to do that much slow kind of strategy, he would have had to have remained very calm and could trip up other players by like making them get really frustrated because he's doing the same thing. They're always trying to guess what he's going to do next, but because he's really calm and slow about everything, he's actually predicting them before they can figure anything out. And I think that's a huge credit to him.
Yeah, he's always 4 turns ahead. He's not the next step ahead. He's turns and turns ahead of you.
And especially with the randomness of constantly switching out, you have to know that, okay, my next Pokemon going out is going to get switched back as soon as he gets hit. So I know that the one after that's going to be this Pokemon. And like having to like go that far ahead and say like, okay, I know that he's going to do a Thunder. Therefore, by the time this happens, then my Raichu will come out.
Yeah, it's just so intense and so awesome. You know, some people think that Pokemon is very simple or for kids, but I love that you can choose just how in-depth you want it to be, and the competitive scene does such a good job of showcasing that.
Yeah, definitely. It expands or contracts to your desired difficulty. Speaking of which, moving on, for those of you who have been asking, so we've got a lot of questions about this, how do you get into the competitive scene with Pokemon? How do you start? There's so much to learn. There's over 720 Pokemon that you have to learn about. I mean, the metagame is pretty small, but where do you guys start? Where would you say is the best place for super, super beginners?
Super beginners should probably go to ign.com/wikis and check out some of our Pokemon guides for beginners.
You may have written those, just a guess.
Yeah. So Brendan, you're on the wikis team.
Yes.
So you know, like that's a good place to go for if you don't know any terms or if you're looking up items or something. Our wiki has a lot of that.
Yeah, it's a great starter guide for kind of figuring out what Pokemon do, like the move dexes and how different things work with stab and like who attacks first, special effectiveness, the abilities, how they play in. And then once you've got that idea, once you've got the basics down, then you kind of want to learn the strategies, and that's kind of when some of the more the bigger, the communities who focus on that come into play, because we can't cater to all types at IGN. We try and help at least for the guides content for people who are like, what am I doing here? How do I even beat this game? Like, how to beat the Elite Four? That's where we kind of help in, and then once people springboard off of that, there's a lot of places you can go, and I think you know a lot of those.
Smogon! Smogon's my favorite because you can look up any Pokemon and it'll have strategies for every tier. So Smogon has these kind of fan-invented, unofficial battle tiers based on the Pokemon's use. So they're like overused, underused. If you don't want to use like legendaries or something, overused and underused are pretty good. There's Little Cup, which is all like unevolved Pokemon, so you can use like Smoochum or something. Not that I would use
really
Smoochum,
cute.
but it's really cute. I really like Smogon because, so this is my like first tip, I think, if you want to get into the competitive scene at all, or playing competitively even with your friends, like not even professionally or anything, is to pick a favorite Pokemon and look it up on Smogon, and see what strategies are available, and familiarize yourself with the terms, like what is a Pokemon's role? How does it, is it an all-out attacker? Is it a support? Is it, what is its use? And they also have tips for team building. So if I look up, Sylveon, it'll say, this Pokemon coordinates well with these other Pokemon, and you can use this strategy. And it's just a good but next intermediate step for starting to team build.
Yeah,
it's really interesting.
I think breeding really helped me a lot. I think that the way that I started breeding was just by looking it up online, Googling, looking at YouTube videos, but it teaches you just a lot about stats and how they interact with each other and balancing out specific kinds of Pokemon. So I think that's super important and is a really good foundation for figuring out your team. But also there are regional events everywhere.
Sure.
Pretty much everywhere in the world has regional competitive events. I used to go to them in a kind of small city in Australia, so definitely look into those because the communities there are always awesome. And you see everything up on a huge projector and you can see what everyone's doing.
Yeah.
And I was always surprised, like seeing people use, when I first went, entirely like weather-based stuff, and A lot of people using smokescreen, and when I was just getting into it, I had no idea that people would play that way. So
Yeah,
it's cool to see it firsthand.
I was never a weather person until I saw one of those, and I was like,
you're like, oh, I need that.
Weather teams. Yeah, that's a great one. Like just practice, like play test a team. Back to the point of breeding, though, I use Cerebi to get a lot of resources, because resources on what berries work for if you mess up your EVs or something. That's not a super big problem anymore with super training. But breeding, the best way to start with that is just to look it up, because there's a lot of good starter guides. Basically, the way I get Pokemon as like my parent Pokemon is through Wonder Trade, because a lot of people will send out their like breeding trash, and it's usually like not trash. It's like if you're looking for a Pokemon with 5 perfect IVs, so 5 31s, then you can get one with maybe 4 of them that somebody was like, well, this is my throwaway because I was looking for 5, and then you get that 4, and it's a great starting point, catalyst to a breeding line. And I've spent a lot of time hatching eggs. But once you get the hang of it and you get a routine, you like watch TV and like ride around on your bike. And,
I with X and Y, the city that you can ride around in circles, I basically stuck something under. So while I was sleeping, it would just ride around in circles, and then I'd wake up and be like, sweet. Yeah.
You get a lot.
Lazy.
It's a good way. You can't do that in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, because you have to like physically turn.
Yeah.
And I was so bummed.
Yeah.
I was like, I want to do the circle trick. So yeah, just familiarize. I'm having such trouble with words today.
It's a hard word.
It's late in a Thursday.
It's late in a Thursday, and I've been thinking about Pokemon all week. But yeah, just learn the terms. EV training is easier than ever with super training. Sun and Moon are going to introduce hyper training.
It'll be super easy with Sun and Moon, and I'm kind of hoping that Pokemon Go hype like brings a lot of people into Sun and Moon as well.
Me too.
And it's such like a simple way to get involved in the competitive scene as well because of hyper training. So
yeah, and
it's
if you're into Pokemon Go at all, you might be into competitive Pokemon a little bit, because you might be looking at stats if you're into CP, if you're enjoying your Pokemon with the
Check
highest
out the
CP.
new appraisal feature of this one up.
Exactly, from the Pokemon Go update. If you're into that, breeding in Pokemon especially ties into a lot of that compulsion I have when I'm in Pokemon Go to like get a higher CP Pokemon.
Totally.
And then I think the last tip I have is going to Pokemon.com to look at pro players' teams, and that's where you can get a lot of inspiration. I wouldn't say necessarily like copy those teams, because a lot of them take a lot of skill to use. Like Wolf Glick's team, the VGC champion this year, his took so much skill to use. He beat a mirror team with that team because he knows how to play it. But at least knowing what Pokemon people are using and like what do pro players consider good.
And I also think figuring out why is a good way to learn. Like looking at why is this person using this with all of these things, and when you can get an understanding of how the teams work together and the importance of that teamwork, then you can probably learn a lot about the game as a whole.
Right, like that's where I went first to figure out, once legendaries were introduced, I was like, what legendaries are people using? Because I didn't really know where to begin with that. And then I saw Groudon, Kyogre, Rayquaza. I was like, okay.
That goes a lot for both the video and the trading card game. Like no matter what, like if you find back when I played Magic the Gathering, they had championship decks, and half of the fun is like, oh, he used this. Okay, I have his deck, now I must be able to win. But knowing how they used it and why these cards were good or why those Pokemon were good is like half of the battle, is figuring out how they used them, what situations they work in, and which ones they don't, and knowing when to fight your battles.
Them good.
Yeah.
It's like, fighting through the games and beating the Elite Four is very simple compared to competitive Pokemon. Like I feel like, you just level up enough and you're fine, but competitive Pokemon is a whole other thing.
Yeah, and that's when you go find a regional tournament.
Exactly.
And practice.
And watch the pros and
'em.
see what they're doing and why they're doing it, and just like see when they're switching, like, okay, why did he do that? And try and predict what they're going to do, and it kind of helps you learn as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like chess in that way.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I actually had a lot of fun trying to predict, because when I was watching all the games from the World Championships this year, I was like, I have no idea. These people are next level. Like, I don't know where they're going with this. And it inspired me to practice more and play more. And then I went home and I played. And I was like, I have so far to go.
I also really want to say, like, we're kind of making it sound intimidating. The community is also lovely.
Yes.
Like, every single person that I spoke to at the World Champs was, like, giving each other advice and really happy to see other people there, and everyone was very excited to be there. So it's like, there's so much support from other people. There's Facebook groups, there's Twitter pages. Like, there's just an abundance of people you can talk to who will help you and want you to succeed as well. It's a fun thing, despite, winning a ton of money.
Yeah,
the World Championships.
right. I mean, it's competitive and people care about winning, but all the players I've spoken to in like over the years that I've been following the scene are in it because they just love Pokemon.
Yeah.
Like I think that's the real point is how do you get into competitive Pokemon? You gotta love Pokemon.
Yeah, totally.
Like love it and you will find your way. There's also YouTube resources.
Yeah.
Like there's just pro players who give a lot of tips because they want to foster that community.
Yeah,
too.
streamers as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, so let us know if you get into competitive Pokemon. We want to hear how it went for you. And then I want to do a little fun thing for the last segment because we've been talking some technical stuff. What are your favorite Pokemon to battle with? Just if you're battling for fun.
Mine's totally Gyarados.
I know.
I really like Gyarados. It's not useful competitively at all, but I love that everything that Gyarados is weak to, there is a HM to counter that. So it's like, what kind of weird water dragon thing can also breathe fire and like use Thunder Shock? It doesn't make any sense at all, but the TMs are just so great that I absolutely love Gyarados.
I loved doing that. When I first realized I could teach like Thunder to a Starmie or whatever,
Yeah.
I was like, everyone's gonna
What
be
is
so
this?
fooled.
I think it's specific. I think
You
Gyarados
thought you had a
specifically-
water Pokemon.
Yeah.
Whoops.
I was like
like-
Thunder and I think it's like Fire Blast. I don't remember what it is specifically, but
Yeah.
it's like all these bank of TMs that are just like, this doesn't make any sense. It's so great.
It's like not even good for Pokemon that are used to counter Gyarados. It's just like I love tricking. I love
Surprising people.
Surprising
Yeah.
people is fun. Brendan, what about you?
I love making people mad with just big, fat, tough Pokemon with like leftovers. And they like Snorlax, who just like, why won't you die? Go away. But like, no. Oh, okay, he's dead. Here's another one. Have fun with that.
It's like Lance with his Dragonites.
Yeah, pretty much.
Dragonites!
That was the worst.
Always have a Dragonite in reserve.
Oh, it's the worst.
I think my favorite, and this is super gimmicky, my favorite Pokemon, like I love Eevee, my favorite evolution is Umbreon. Umbreon can learn Swagger and Foul Play. So what I like to do, so Swagger increases attack like sharply on the other Pokemon and confuses it, and then Foul Play attacks using the opponent's attack stat. So you use Swagger, pump up the opponent's
is
attack
really cool.
stat, and then attack them with their own stat.
Yeah.
And I
Sounds
love
like something
it.
Kanye West would do.
I know. I love it because it's like something I would do to mess with a friend. Like I wouldn't use that.
It's just super mean.
It's just really mean. Like an Umbreon, if you don't have the right like EV spread on it, it can be taken down like super easily with a fighting type move. Like it's just like really easy to take down. I mean, in most respects, it's pretty bulky. But with that, I'm just like, ha ha ha. Like,
so evil.
get ready for me and my Umbreon.
I feel like Gyarados having both speed and special attack also just makes me love it. It's just such a jerk Pokemon.
and it has a Mega.
Yeah.
So it's
He
like,
I was so
went through
excited
a
when
hard
he was
life
announced.
as a Magikarp to become a jerk.
Exactly.
He has deserved his jerkhood.
Exactly. So I respect that.
he's like the former like bullied kid who becomes a bully.
How you like
Yeah.
me now?
yeah. You take your lunch money.
Yeah, it's basically like he was bullied his whole life. Nobody thought that he could do anything, and then suddenly just electric types and fire types and water types. Like what? None of this. You can do everything.
Do anything
What
you
are
want.
all these
I'm a
TMs?
giant flying dragon fish. Do what I want.
Kind of looks like a sock.
Just a quick note on Gyarados, since I also love Gyarados. It's actually based off of a story of a koi fish that swims upstream and becomes a
Aw,
dragon.
That's
Was
amazing.
he also a jerk?
That makes me like it even more.
I'm not sure if the koi fish was supposed to be a jerk in
Probably.
the fable that
it
it's
canon?
based
I
on.
got upstream. What about you, fish? No, you're down there. Yeah. Suck it.
Not sure if canon.
Versus, so you know how some people, so this is just like a total Gyarados tangent. Some people think that it was a mistake that Magikarp should have been Dragonite because they're both orange, and Dragonair should have been Gyarados because they're both blue. But I read the thing about the koi fish turning into a dragon, and the kind of bead that Dragonair has is based off of Korean dragons, and that's why it turns into a real dragon in Dragonite, even though Dragonite looks pretty dumb.
The more you know.
The more you know.
I've seen a meme that is like Charizard next to a Dragonite, and it's on Charizard. It's like when she contours,
Yep.
which I love because like Dragonite has like this chubby, curvy face, and then you just put makeup on him, and he looks like a
looks like a Charizard.
That's so great.
Yeah. All right, that's all the time we have for Gyarados tangents and dragon memes. But thank you so much for supporting our show so far. This is an experiment. We're only on episode 3, and every nice thing you've said has made us so happy. Thank you again to Alanah and Brendan for joining us. New guests, great job, everybody.
Thank you.
But yeah, please let us know if you want to see more Mimi tangents or whatever you want to see on the show. Please let us know in the comments and on Twitter. And we'll see you next time. Bye.